Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. Episode 63. My friend James Hahn comes on the show to talk about marketing, how to do it for energy, oil and gas, whatever you're at in the business. James is an expert. Be sure to check out his website. We will link to that in the show notes. Without further ado, here is James Hahn. Well, James, we've had on Mark LaCour a few times, but a lot of people may not know this. You're kind of the inspiration to kind of get Mark LaCour, as we call him, the godfather of oil and gas podcasting. You're actually maybe the godfather's godfather? How would you?
I've heard you say that before, and it's funny because I'm actually the godfather.
I know, but it's one of those things. It's like, sometimes it's, for public perception, you just gotta kind of say it because Mark is probably the bigger face. But yeah, actually, you're kind of the inspiration or the driving force that.
Well,
got
so
Mark
you know
going.
The story though.
Right. Well,
I don't know because he didn't tell me
audience.
until a year into it. But when I went to him with the idea, he actually thought it was a stupid idea. And he only did it. Yeah. He only started oil and gas this week with me as a favor, just whatever. I'll help a friend. And here we are, 2 more years later, and it's a major revenue stream. And he's completely repositioned his whole business. So you're welcome, Mark.
Yeah, no, I've heard him tell the story. For those the listeners who don't know, Oil and Gas This Week, which is, I guess, the biggest oil and gas podcast.
The number one oil and gas podcast in the world.
Yeah, it's a great show. Weekly comes out on, I think, Fridays or Mondays. It comes to my phone automatically, so I don't really know what day it comes out on.
Friday. Yep, every Friday morning.
Friday. And James was kind of the one who kind of got Mark LaCour on board. And yeah, that's exactly how I've heard Mark tell the story. And so, but your background is in sales and marketing, which is why I wanted to have you on today because, someone like myself, I do this, but also, run a business, and I've got to get clients, and I've got to market to clients, and I've got to do sales. So let's just kind of set the table with your background, and then let's talk about how to market for energy companies, and oil and gas companies would probably be a little bit more specific, but just in general, let's just set the table and we'll get there.
Sounds good. So I got my start in sales when I was 18 years old. I was working 2 jobs, opening one kitchen and closing another, because that was the only thing I knew how to make money. And I went to Dad after I was working 90 hours a week. And I said, Dad, I am dying. How can I make more money? He said, why don't you go get a job selling furniture at Art Van? And I said, they'll hire me? He said, they'll hire anybody. So,
right.
One of those typical high churn up in Michigan. And that's where I started. And I've been in sales now for 18 years. So yeah, I've got a background in sales. And then also I dropped out of journalism school. I'm technically a junior at Michigan State University, but once I realized that I was already making more money in sales than I would with a journalism degree, I just went and worked at Quicken Loans.
Right. Okay, so one of the things I think that's interesting is, and I tell this to people all the time, if you talk to folks in our business model, like here, like the podcasting or the websites or whatever, if you go outside of this and you look at people in real estate or any kind of other sales and marketing, there is tons of advice. How to get a real estate listing, how to get a loan listing, how to do this, and this. For oil and gas, there's just not a lot of ways to figure out how to market to these big, huge Fortune 500 companies or the little mom and pop producer out there in Midland, Texas. So let's how do you think about client acquisition? Where does it start for you, and how do you work that process to getting a close?
Well, it works well for me because we are the only digital marketing consultancy in the whole entirety of oil and gas. And so for me, I saw an opportunity back when I was at Drilling Info. That was my first job in oil and gas when I moved to Texas, moved to Austin, got a job at Drilling Info, worked in sales for them for a year. And then I worked in technical writing for them for a year. And then they got wind of the fact that I was pretty into marketing. And so I effectively became the head of their digital marketing team. Within 18 months, I was crushing it for them. We were producing 150 leads with individual blog posts. And really my story in how I went out on my own is that I just started helping people for free because I just wanted to help as many people as I could. And next thing you know, people started offering me, consulting jobs. And so I went out on my own January 1st, 2014. So for me, it's sort of a all of the above approach. Most people think about cold calling and outbound. For me, it's really about how do we create helpful, valuable, relevant content to drive people inbound so that we can build relationships at scale over time And when it's time for them to engage with us or we reach out to them, then they feel like they already know us. And so for me, it's content as well as being very strategic about who we approach and how we approach them.
Okay, so let's focus there on content. One of the things is, when you think about doing a content type marketing, in your opinion, does it really matter? Video, audio, writing? Is there really one preference, or should you just play to your strength?
You should play to your strength as well as your audience. Whatever your strength is, yeah, if you're a writer, write. If you are really good behind a microphone, start a podcast. It really just depends on what is the best fit for you and your personality, but also looking at how your own audience is consuming that content and figuring out what is driving the most revenue for you. So for instance, I did the first, I think, 93 episodes of Oil and Gas this week, and I stepped away from the show at the beginning of 2017. And I did that because after I looked back at 2016, I saw that, while the podcast drove a lot of impressions for me, it was giving me a really great name. It's a great success story. I mean, I think the show has over 350,000 downloads and listeners in over 175 countries at this point. So it's a really great story, but it wasn't driving a lot of my business for my consulting side of things, which is my bread and butter. However, every time I wrote a piece of content in 2016, I got a new client. And so it didn't take long for me to just put two and two together and say, okay, audio content is driving a lot of traffic to my site, but it's not creating a lot of conversions for me in terms of leads that want to work with my business. So I'm going to pivot. The show still goes on. Jake Corley did a great job taking my spot on the show, and I'm still partners with Mark on Oil and Gas Global Network. However, I've been able to refocus my time on the type of content that drives the most business for me.
Okay, and so that's where I think a lot of maybe our listeners kind of struggle. At least I know that we do. So my main business is engineering, surveying, right-of-way acquisition. And so you sit back and you go, okay, we could put out articles about that, but that's probably not really interesting to our clients because our clients aren't necessarily interested in, proper way to locate a property quota or something like that. It's very technical. So when you think about content marketing and you go, okay, well, my clients are, a Shell or an Exxon or an Enterprise Products or Kinder Morgan or whoever they are, you're, an oil and gas company here. How would you go about trying to figure out what kind of content appeals to those type of people?
Well, it all goes back to your core value proposition. I mean, what is your core business? And the easiest way that I can answer that question is look at the questions that your current prospects and your customers ask you every day. That's something I got from Mark Schaefer, who's a really phenomenal marketer. People should look into him, thesaleslion.com. And it's an exercise that he calls They Ask You Answer, where you just list out all of the questions that anybody's asking you about your business. And at that point, you've got a great starting point for all of the content that you're going to produce.
Okay, so I'm kind of working this out in my head here. What you're saying is get the sales and the marketing guys in and maybe even the project managers and say, okay, hey, what are our clients asking us? What problems are they asking us to solve? And then figure out from there, okay, they're asking these 5, 6, 7 questions. And then from there we say, okay, we want to go blogs, videos, or written content, and then build it out on the website. Is that kind of what you're saying?
So, yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up. The salespeople absolutely need to be involved. Because the salespeople are on the front line. They're the people, they're the guys and gals that are out there that are hearing from your customers every single day, and they are able to understand what are the main key challenges that your prospects and your clients are working on. And so that's how you're able to target your client. Now that's more of an audience-based approach. Now, the way that you asked me up front was, okay, Kinder Morgan, these guys. And that's another question as well, because you have your audience-based approach, but then you have something we call a persona-based approach. And bear with me because I'm a marketer. I'm going to use some marketing terms, but a term that is very popular out there is buyer persona. So who is our buyer persona? Who are we writing for? And you might be in a position where what your audience is asking you doesn't match up with who you're trying to target. And so you might actually end up producing content that's more for your targeted people that also serves your audience. And that sounds really convoluted. So let me just explain it a little bit. Everybody kind of has two different audiences, no matter what type of business, whether it's oil and gas or mortgages or who knows what. everybody has different types of businesses. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, what audience can I serve that will bring along everyone else? And I work with my clients, with our clients on this in terms of sales copy all the time. I mean, it really goes through with all of the messaging. Because if you tailor your content, for instance, if we're talking about sales copy on a website that is, I don't know, a completions company. I'm working with one right now, Ace Completions. Don't go to acecompletions.com until this is published, because then I think the new website will be live. But regardless, let's say you're a completions company. Your end user might be the guy in the field that's rigging up hoses and doing the completion work. But your core audience is probably more like the technical salespeople and the executives back in the home office. And so what you have to do is say, okay, which one of these two audiences, if I go to the end user or to the executive, what is going to bring along both? Well, if I go to the end user, it's not going to connect with the executive or the technical salespeople at all. But if I target the technical salespeople or the executives, then it will just by inherently be able to bring along the end user in the way that it communicates. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I do. I see what you're saying. Let me just play a little devil's advocate here. Could you just make content, two types of content, one for each audience?
Absolutely. And that's what you want to do. The thing that we stress with all of our clients and in anybody that I talk to and work with is test everything. You know, you and I, before we started this interview, you're talking about how you're going to 3 episodes a week now through the summer to see how it works. Now, that might work. It might not work in terms of bringing more downloads and expanding your reach. Or it could be a situation at the end of the summer where you say, you know what, this isn't worth the time and money in terms of time, the time that you're taking to produce the content, right? And so test everything and just look at your numbers and look at your analytics. But one thing I will add, just a really strong caveat on that, is don't make any decisions based off of one thing that you've done. Because I've talked to a lot of business owners that are, Larry, he set up a Facebook page for us last year. It didn't do anything. It's like, they posted once on Facebook and it didn't do anything. Well, the point is that, you definitely want to spread your content out so that you're ending up, you're testing things and saying, okay, because it might be a situation where, for instance, like the iPhone, and this is something that Mark LaCour talks about a lot, is the iPhone's penetration in oil and gas. And it's really fascinating case study because of the fact that the penetration for oil and gas around the iPhone, that came from the bottom up, right? Because it wasn't going to be the executives that were going to be like, okay, we're going to throw caution to the wind and get rid of all this, BlackBerry security that we have. But it was the individuals that were demanding it, that were selling it into the company. And so it could be a situation where the end user is the best audience because he's going to be your best champion and getting you into the business. So, that's kind of why I started saying all of the above, because really what you just have to do is test everything and see what works. Look at your metrics. If this post, how many people read this post versus this post? How many people opted in on our email list once they came to this content versus that content? And that's how you're able to make data-driven decisions over time based on things in reality, not just things like in your mind, like, oh, we tried this, we tried that. No, you try everything, look at the stats, and then decide on the right direction from there.
Right. And one thing that I think is important that maybe some people don't think about is I was telling someone the other day when I was looking at this podcast, we don't have Mark LaCour numbers, but I think we're like 80-something countries now. I said it's
awesome.
It's very flattering almost to think that 80-something countries around the world I could step off a plane and I could walk down the street and someone could go, "Hey, I've heard your voice somewhere." That's a weird feeling. Now, but here's what's even more interesting. You're talking about building content. If people follow your content, they usually begin to develop a relationship with you through that content, right? They say, okay, I've read James Hahn's newsletter or I've heard Ryan Ray, and all of a sudden they make a determination. Either this is someone I'd like to talk to or hang out with or do business with, or I wouldn't. And so content, there's a sense in which you're building that relationship through the content so that when you do go make that first meeting, it's not a cold meeting anymore. It's a warm meeting because they think, okay, I've heard James Hahn speak here. I saw his website. I saw his content. I like that guy. Let's bring him in for an interview. Or you call and say, hey, I want to come for a meeting. You've really broken down a lot of walls and can, I think, really push the ball down the field in the sales process.
Oh, absolutely. And that's it, not to keep mentioning Mark here, but that's one of the quotes I have in my email at the bottom is from Mark, is that I was able to get his leads as much as 90% closed by the time they reach out to him. And this is something that we really stress, especially in oil and gas. And it's what we call scaled relationship building. I sort of mentioned it earlier, but just to break down what I mean by that is, we work in oil and gas. Obviously, digital is slow going. We're still in the very early adoption phase of digital across the oil field. And so a lot of guys, when you talk to them about digital, they think, oh yeah, websites and Facebook and, pictures of food, and I don't need that, right? And what we're able to do, especially with some of the older guys that are able to wrap their minds around this, is by explaining it this way, is that when you go to a networking event for the first time, you understand that you're not going to make a sale when you walk in the door. You're not even going to necessarily make a valuable connection the first time you go, but you keep going back and you keep going back. You don't go in there and start shoving. You're not the guy that shoves, the business card down the throat. You build those relationships. And so, but the thing about that is the fact that you and I, we can only talk to one person physically at a time. But right now on this podcast, we are talking to hundreds of people at the same time. And myself personally, I know that I'm talking to thousands of people as a result of podcasts and blogs and other videos and everything that I've done. And so that's what we mean by scaled relationship building. And you just really hit your nail on the head, is that you're able to develop just really, really incredible relationships with people before they even know you. And especially in the form of podcasting. Podcasting is amazing because of the fact that if you really think about it, you're talking straight into someone's brain for 30 to 40 minutes at a time.
Right.
And that's how people, I mean, even you and I, when we first sat down, you were just like, I feel like I know you. And that is an amazing thing. And it puts you so far ahead of the game, especially for us and our clients. Typically, the people that we work with are really like high growth companies. And it kind of goes back to Drilling Info and recognizing the pattern with all of the different customers that we worked with over time, and bring on more and more of those types of clients, because a lot of the kind of newer, if you will, companies that are trying to displace legacy vendors, in the case of Drilling Info, I guess you would say it's IHS, or other vendors that I'm working with that I can't name names of their competition, but regardless, they're gunning for someone who has a much larger market share. And so if you know that you're sort of a David versus Goliath to begin with, then you have to do everything possible to develop those relationships as quickly as you can and as broadly as you can. And that's something that podcasting especially does extremely well.
Taking a quick break in the action to thank our sponsor.
For over 20 years, R Squared Global has served the energy and infrastructure industries. With offices in Texas, Alabama, and Louisiana, R Squared Global offers engineering, survey, right-of-way, and GIS solutions. For more information, please visit www.gor2.com.
One final thing is, the first time I met Mark, I think maybe 2 or 3 months before I met you, something like that, if I remember correctly. But what it did was I'd listened to so many of y'all's episodes, I don't remember how many y'all had at the time, that when I went to meet with Mark, I had this preconceived notion of what Mark was going to be like and what you were going to be like when I met both of you guys. And within a few minutes, I knew, okay, either these are the guys on the podcast or they're not. This is what I thought I was getting, or, oh my gosh, these guys are fake. And it allows me to not have to go in there and figure out, okay, who is Mark LaCour? I know what Mark said on the podcast. I've heard him. I've read his website. I know all this stuff. So it really makes because when you go into a sales meeting, prospect is sitting there evaluating, who are you? What do you know? What don't you know? You're being quizzed, right? Well, we kind of have this backlog of information that allows us to go in there now, and they kind of know who you are, and then you just validate that, because as long as you're being who you are on the podcast, then you've really cut out a lot of the legwork. But I want to talk about events, because that's one of the things that we kind of go back and forth on in our company. I'm sure a lot of people do as well. You go to these events, and either you have a booth or you walk the event, and I've kind of boiled it down to like this. So I went to NAPE earlier this year, and I found NAPE to be completely fascinating because it was my first time to go. And here's what I took away from it. If for no other reason, I could go to NAPE and I could find out information by walking the event that it would take me hours to Google because it's just not readily available, or maybe it's not even on Google. So I was a member of the press, so I didn't have to pay. But if I were to pay it would have been worth it just to go and see, okay, this booth right here is selling acreage in this area, and I see 7 other booths that are in the same geographic region, and there are people flocking to these booths. And these booths over here, there is no one coming by, and they're on the same geographic region. There's some correlation here that people are interested in this and they're not interested in that, and you just can't get that value on the internet. And so I've kind of boiled conferences down that, yeah, you can maybe go and meet people and close a deal there, but really sometimes it's more about the information for me that I can get there that maybe a competitor who doesn't want to go can't get. So what are your thoughts on conferences and stuff like that? How do you evaluate them, and how should businesses look at them as far as their marketing budget?
So as far as their marketing budget, it really depends on where they are in their growth cycle. Because what we're talking about is the difference between niche marketing and mass marketing. Because having a booth at a conference is very much a mass marketing play. And what do I mean by that? Well, when we talk about mass marketing, typically we're talking about commercials, we're talking about magazine spreads and things like this. And so it just depends on where you are in your growth cycle. Now, for instance, NAPE, I love NAPE. For me, NAPE is home. And I'm a major supporter of NAPE and always will, because I would not be where I am without NAPE. And that said, there are certain companies that if they weren't at NAPE, people would take notice and it would be a big deal, right?
Right.
So if Drilling Info wasn't there, if ConocoPhillips or Landmark, you go on down the list. So there are certain companies that have grown to a certain size where they have to have a presence in these areas. And that's not only true in oil and gas, it's true in plenty of other, when you talk about Salesforce, for instance, there's plenty of companies that because they're tech companies, they have to have a presence at the Salesforce conference in San Francisco every year because they've grown to that stature. And really the question is, where are you in your growth cycle? Now, if you're a startup and you just got going, I would not recommend that you allocate budget toward having a booth at the location. I definitely think it would be a wise investment to do something like, for instance, David Reed over at National Oil of Arco, the chief marketing officer over there, they do an off-site event, right? Where people from NAPE, they bus them out to the location where they have food trucks and they're exhibiting all of their thing, and I mean they're all of their tools and everything that they have, their rigs and their people. It's an amazing thing that they do, where they're able to leverage the fact that all these people are in town and want to see what they're up to, but they're not paying for that booth space, although they do have a booth back there. And that also brings up a whole nother question of where are we in the market cycle? Because depending on where you are in the growth cycle as well as the market cycle, I got to give it a big nod to Dave Reed about this, is because I was talking to him about this most recent NAPE where a lot of the companies, and I got this intel by just having a conversation with one of the attendees that was down from Nova Scotia, Canada. He was super upset because he comes to, actually it's OTC, I'm sorry, not NAPE, but he comes to OTC once a year to be able to see everything in person. Well, all of these companies were really scaling back their budget. And so as a result, the only things that he could see at OTC were what in his own words, what he said was, I could have just emailed my sales rep for these pamphlets, right?
Right.
And so Dave Reed, when I talked to him about that, and I've got his clearance to tell this story, which is quote him on this, which is the fact that the market is down right now, and this is the time when you lean in. Because back when oil prices were $100 a barrel, anybody would buy anything from anyone as long as it was available.
Right.
But in a down cycle, it's not a time to pull back. It's a time to lean in, because everybody else is going to be pulling back. And so you have much more of an opportunity to create that value with those people. So there's not a one size fits all cookie cutter answer for any of this. It all depends on, what is the size of your company? How long have you been around? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? It could be a situation where it does finally make sense to go ahead and get that booth at OTC or NAPE or wherever. Or it could be a situation where you're going to have your company attend, you're going to pay to attend, but you're also going to do an event maybe at a steakhouse or somewhere that's in the vicinity where you're able to get a whole bunch of your prospects that happen to be in town and really create a lot of really high value conversations around the conference, but not necessarily on the floor. And that can be a very valuable technique. So it all depends.
Yeah, and I guess my kind of thoughts are similar on some level. I would say that for us, when we we had changed our name a few years back, and we were trying to brand ourselves in a certain way. We started getting the boost. And what we noticed immediately was within 6 to 8 months, people said, I never heard of you guys, to, oh, yeah, I've heard of y'all somewhere. And believe it or not, that's a big difference because, people go, I've never heard of you, to, yeah, I've seen you somewhere. And we'd been in business at that point when I think we founded in 1995. So it wasn't like we were, just opening our doors. We've been around for a while. And so it was kind of one of those things just to people to say, oh, okay. But the other thing is, what I found is if I can go to a conference and I know that I can get strategic competitive advantages because there's going to be someone presenting or there will be people there that are going to talk about stuff that you just can't go and Google. There is just the price of admission sometimes is worth it. And I think we've
absolutely.
We've
I agree with
that.
you. I agree with you. Yeah.
And I'll just say that's what I found about NAPE was I could go there and I could walk around and I could see where the deal makers were going, what they were interested in, and then I can go back and say, okay, I want to make sure my business development folks are targeting this area and not so much this area because this is where it's happening. This is where the wheelers and dealers are going to. And so, there's the conference thing I find interesting because there's a wide range of opinions on, what's going on. And some conferences, just to put it out there, some conferences do it better than others. Some conferences make it where folks like vendors should go to, and some conferences really treat the vendors bad. And so it's not.
Oh yeah, yeah. It all depends. And we're talking about, in my opinion, two of the vanguard, which would be, NAPE and OTC. But one thing I really want to add on this, though, because the thing that separates us from any other marketing consultancy that's out there is the fact that we're brand storytellers focused on something we call sales-driven marketing. We don't look at things like Facebook likes and retweets and fuzzy numbers that mean nothing. The things that we care about, actually, there's three things we care about: traffic, leads, and sales. How much traffic do we drive to your website? Of that traffic, how much is converting? What are our conversion rates? How many leads are we producing? And of those leads, how many are closing as deals? How do we increase all of those numbers? And so if we look at things from a sales-driven marketing perspective, then that changes the dynamic as well, because you could say, okay, well, this is all in all going to cost us let's just say $30,000 to attend this conference, exhibit at it, and so forth. Well, for $30,000 in Facebook ads and Twitter and LinkedIn and so forth, I can get you hundreds of thousands of visitors to your website.
Right. $30,000 on Facebook goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about whatever. I'm not, a math whiz. That's why I'm a marketer.
Right.
In a sales guy. But if we talk about an average, so let's just say 30 cents a click, which is pretty generous, honestly.
Right.
We could get it much lower, but let's say 30 cents a click at $30,000. Yeah, we can do some serious damage with that sort of a budget if we're spending it properly. And then you get into other inbound activities like webinars, for instance. Webinars are some of the highest converting.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of leads, in terms of creating warm leads and so forth, and allocating some budget towards creating content and sharing content, but also filling those webinars up with people that are interested in what you're having to say, so their sales team can follow up afterwards. There's a lot to be done around that. I mean, that's one of the key strategies we work with people on and building out their whole sort of inbound marketing engine, if you will.
No, absolutely. And I think oil and gas. I've been. God, I feel kind of old now, but almost a third of my life I've been working in the energy business now. And so it's kind of one of those things that when you say it, you're like, oh man, I'm still young, but a third of your life. But I've seen the change from, I remember you talk about the BlackBerry. It's funny. I remember when I had it, we all called it a crackberry, because it was the most addictive thing you'd ever seen. And everyone had one. It was just awesome. And, that was back when certain technologies were coming online and some of the vendors would get them and you'd go to oil and gas companies like, nah, we're not really interested in paying for that right now. And that was, that was just 6, 7, 8 years ago. And it's still, oil and gas today is, I think, on some levels behind technologically speaking, at least how they present themselves, how they get out to the world. But there are real humans that work for these companies. And so we kind of have this dilemma to where you see a company who's like, I'm not going to name a name here, but oil and gas, Acme Oil and Gas, just make up something. They're not putting out content. They're not doing anything to reach out to the marketplace. But they have people like me and you who are on Facebook or on Twitter, who are on LinkedIn, who are searching the web, and they're using all of these same tools. And so it's kind of hard because you see the people that you want to work for not doing what you're doing, but we almost forget that the people inside of the company, they're using these tools, they're using these resources, and there's ways to get them to your website so that either they will call you or when you call upon them, they already know who you are.
Well, that's something that we work with our clients on as well, is tapping into the people that are passionate about this within the company, because being a consultancy, we're not an agency. An agency is they're going to look to to get you as an account and grow that account for years and years to come. What we want to do is we want to be able to come in. We will operate it as an agency up front if we have to, but we want to be able to find that within your company, find those people that are passionate about these things, find those millennials that are hiding out there that really want to make things happen online. Or even sometimes, not even sometimes, plenty of times it's an older guy that gets it. But we're able to work with those people within an organization and to build the skill set into the company so that we eventually train ourselves out of a position, if you will. And that's a really great point that you bring up, because there are people in every one of these companies. People are using Facebook. Everyone uses, 90%, over 90% of Americans have Facebook. Everyone uses Google. They own 97% of search traffic. So there's a lot to be said for search engine optimization and everything like that. So there are people within your organization typically that are going to rise up and do this. And I mean, that's really what happened with me at Drilling Info. Word just kind of got around that I was into this, and I sort of got a really big sandbox to play in, and
Right.
the rest is history. So yeah, if this is something that you're thinking about starting an initiative within your own company, even before you start thinking about hiring new people and having to spend that money, you might look at your sales team. Maybe there's a guy that's struggling that would do a lot better in marketing. Maybe there's somebody that's, I don't know, maybe on the technical development side of things that's super passionate about this side of the business. You really don't know. But if you're hiring great people, then hopefully they're going to be bought in, and they're going to want to help you dominate online, because that's really the name of the game. And the great thing is that what you just said is very true, in that we're very behind digitally in this industry, but that makes it beautiful. Because unlike not every other industry, but several other industries that have experienced a quote unquote content shock, if you will, we don't have that situation in oil and gas. So we still have a very wide open playing field. And there are thousands and thousands of niches in this industry that are just begging to be dominated online.
Right.
And all it takes is the whoever gets there first is going to win. I mean, just you talk about not Mark LaCour numbers. I mean, there's a reason.
Right.
There's a reason that Oil and Gas This Week gets thousands of downloads per episode, because we were first.
Yeah. No.
And when you're first, a lot of that goes a long way.
It does go a long way, and I know we got to get out of here, so I'm going to let you go with this. I guess this kind of a final thought here, and I want you to tell people where they can find you, because I do run globalenergymedia.com, the website, and I am by no means a website designer. I put it on WordPress because that makes it easy for someone like me. I do have taken some classes on Facebook marketing, on Twitter and all that stuff, but I'm no James Hahn, and I say that because here's the thing: if you are, I don't care if you're in oil and gas, or if you're in solar, if you're in whatever you're in, and you're going, okay, we got to do content marketing. And you can go to Facebook and you can start a Facebook page. And if you don't understand that Facebook wants your money, and you don't understand how to do this and how it's going, you can get discouraged quite easily. And so you need to talk to someone like James, who can help you through this process. He can set up your website or all the different things he does. So James, kind of give yourself a little plug here. Where can they find you? Where can they reach out to you? And anything else that you want to plug or promote?
No, I appreciate that. So yeah, you can find me at triberocket.com. Tribe like a tribe of people, rocket like a rocket in the sky. That's what we're all about: building online communities and driving, like I said before, traffic, leads, and sales. And really, as far as promotion, just reach out to us. There's another really popular podcast that I listen to. They always ask, what's the one piece of advice you would give people? And the one piece of advice that I try to follow is the fact that I'm a lifelong learner, and I know that I don't know it all.
Yep.
And so please, just reach out. I'd like to hear from anybody that found this conversation interesting, and not even necessarily to close a sale, but just to create more cross-functional intersections in the Medici effect type of a way.
I understand. Well, James, we will link to your website and everything else in the show notes so the listeners can find you with ease. And thank you so much for coming on. It was really a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
James, thanks again for coming on. Always good to talk to you. So knowledgeable about this topic of sales and marketing. Guys, be sure to check out Tribe Rocket. All their stuff. He sends out a great newsletter that I enjoy reading, so be sure to subscribe to that as well. James, we look forward to having you on here again in a few months. Maybe as this world of marketing changes, it's always good to keep up with experts like James. The Global Energy Leaders podcast is produced by Michael Sims and Chris Prine. Chris Prine also serves as editor for the Global Energy Leaders podcast. Until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.